faculty, staff, and alumni. Good afternoon, and welcome again to the panel discussion for Sarasin Update Talk. Before we go into the panel discussion, I'd like to take a few minutes to introduce our panelists, starting from Arin Jira. Arin Jira is the chairman of Sethaput Industrial Gas Company Limited and Deputy Secretary General of the Federation of Thai Industries. Arin has been involved with the AEC efforts as a member and a former chairman of the ASEAN Business Advisory Council, and has worked and continues to work with the government and private sector leaders on this issue. Our second panelist is Dr. Sarasin Viraphol. Dr. Sarasin is an Executive Vice President of the Charoen Pokphand Group. Prior to joining the CP Group, Dr. Sarasin was a career diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and has held various diplomatic posts in the Philippines, Japan, and China. Dr. Sarasin's last position at the ministry was as a Deputy Permanent Secretary. Okay, our third panelist is Dr. Sethaput, Suthiwart-Narueput, a very familiar face, as he probably taught a lot of you. Dr. Sethaput is the managing partner for Advisor Company Limited, a corporate advisory firm. Prior to setting up Advisor Company Limited, Dr. Sethaput worked in various senior positions within the Siam Commercial Bank Group. He was including Chief Economist for SCB, Managing Director and Head of Research at SCB Securities, President of SCB Asset Management, one of the largest asset management companies in Thailand. And prior to that, he was with the Stock Exchange of Thailand, the Ministry of Finance, and before he came back to Thailand, he had worked with the World Bank in Washington, D.C., as well as McKinsey & Company. Okay, our last panelist is Dr. Matthew Verghis. Dr. Matthew is the World Bank's lead economist in this region, which includes Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, and Thailand. Dr. Matthew has been working in various positions within the World Bank in Africa, Europe, Central Asia, East Asia, and the Pacific. Okay. So we have a very good panelist here today, and I know that there are some subtopics that was prepared by Sarasin, but in this first round, I would like to give the stage to each of the panelists and let them speak for about 5 to 10 minutes, and then after that, we'll have Q&A. And if anybody has questions after we've done the first round, you can ask the panel, or if you want to, you can also pass up the questions, and I can ask for you. Okay, so Arin, if you can start us off with the AEC, it would be much appreciated.
Thank you. Thank you, Supachoke. First of all, I'd like to thank Professor Donsak and Anita and the organizers for inviting me to participate in the seminar here today. AEC 2015 is just around the corner. I think I'm sure the people in this room are aware of AEC, but the details you may not know. Thanks to Dr. Rasan just now. He's actually giving you a lot of information on AEC, and what I'd like to do is I'd like to go a little bit faster on my presentation. I have about 9 slides, but I'll go quickly on the information that you've already heard. Perhaps I'm just going to give you some pertinent points that you should know. Next, please. The reason I am giving you this slide is really one simple issue, and that is most of you in this room are probably not aware that Myanmar has changed their national flag. Now you're laughing. Okay, that means you're paying attention. So I don't need to tell you the first 6 and the second 4, and of course we have 10 countries for the ASEAN. Next slide, please. Oh, and by the way, the Western people always refer to this country as Burma. But Myanmar, they're not very happy when you call them Burmese or Burma. Just want to let you know that. So if you Western people around here, the next time you see a Burmese, maybe you can ask, "Are you from Myanmar?" Something like that. Have a better, closer relationship in due course. Okay? Now, let me just review a little bit on objectives of AEC. Of course, the first and foremost, the one that people are talking about most is single market and production base. This one, of course, Dr. Basan had gone through a few things about the free flow of goods. What's going to happen is all the the barriers for free flow of goods, services, investments, skilled labor, and freer flow of capital will be removed. Of course, there'll be non-tariff barriers that will be removed too. But this is something on paper. But in practice, what's going to happen is they're going to come up with, each country will come up with what they call non-tariff measures. This time they don't want to say barrier, they'll say measures. So something like this, I think what we need to do is to make sure that we coordinate our efforts, all the member states, to make sure that we get rid of all these non-tariff barriers, measures. And then, of course, rules and regulations will be simplified and harmonized. You'll see a lot more new ASEAN investors around the ASEAN region. The next one is competitive economic region. This one is really to enhance competitiveness through competition policies, the intellectual property rights, infrastructure development, taxation, e-commerce. And the next item is equitable economic development. This is no more than trying to narrow the economic gap of the original six of ASEAN members, and CL and we, the last four. The important point here is they're trying to ensure that they help SMEs. And this is a group of businesses that are prevalent in the region. We have more than 95% SMEs. The bigger ones we don't have to worry about. We have to help the smaller ones. Then, of course, with globalization, we're talking about integration into the global market. We want to make sure that we become a dynamic global supply chain for this particular region. What we need to do when we do globalization is we need to look beyond the borders of AEC. I think that's an important issue. Next, please. Now, just to give you some statistics, if you must have heard 580 million, 590, just say 600. About 10 years, 10 years ago, the Philippines was about 60 million, and Thailand also 60 million. Today, the Philippines has about 100 million population. Many of you don't know. Vietnam, North and South, of course, about 92. We have right now, I think, I understand, 65 million. But anyway, it's a big area. Of course, if you compare to Europe is 500 million people. GDP size about $2 trillion US. That's of course greater than South Korea, greater than India and Russia. Real GDP growth for this region about 5.2% compared to Europe, or probably about 1.7%. International trade also about $2 trillion US. It's about 5-6 times Thailand's. Foreign direct investment about $50 billion. That's about 60% of China. This last item, international tourism, this one surprises me. 65 million, and that's only second to France. So I'm sure 90% of the people in here must have been to France. Next slide, please. Now, the opportunities and threat. Let me just go over this fairly quickly. You have 600 million people. Of course, you have greater demand for goods and services. This is, of course, going to boost international trade. Of course, it will also expand the advantageous businesses. SMEs will need help. Let me re-emphasize that. What's going to happen is you're going to see more competition in manufacturing and services. Of course, the opportunities will be there because of the economy of scale. costs will be lower, raw materials, supplemental materials will be lower. That's going to create some good bargaining power with our trading partners. And FDI will grow because an integrated market will attract foreign SMEs, not only the multinational companies. Investment opportunities, it's going to be abound, and with the new rules, origin, and also LDC. If you don't know what LDC is, it's really the privileges that you can get from least developed countries. For example, you can use CLMV countries, Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, or Myanmar to be a site for your production base, and you get special privileges when you export to Europe, US, and the rest of the world. New innovation, that's going to happen when you have a lot of new R&D and developmental efforts in trading, manufacturing, and services. I think we need to realize that internationalism of workforce will raise creativity and of course, innovation. The opportunity to develop people, it's going to create good quality people, higher purchasing power for the people, and that will automatically increase the social stability, which we're looking for now. If you're looking at threats, you look at competition. What's going to happen? Well, it's going to be fierce competition. And what's going to happen is, what we need to do is, to overcome this, I think the only way is to ensure that we coordinate our competition carefully in the region. If you're trying to beat your member state to death in terms of competition, you're not going to get there. This time what we need to do is to make sure that do what you can do best and work together. Work together. Yeah, that's right, work together. I just heard that. But anyway, if you don't coordinate your competition, you will fail. If you leave this room, I'm sure all of you have been aware of AEC, but if you leave this room, when you leave this room, you don't understand what I'm saying, or in the panelists, or Dr. Prasad, you only two things that you should remember. What's going to happen? AEC 2015, one. If you're a consumer, things will be cheaper, products will be better, better quality, cheaper. But if you're a going concern, a business entity, an SME, for example, if you don't improve your productivity, your efficiency, your people, you're finished. And that's true. That's what's going to happen. That's why we keep preaching about AEC 2015, what's going to happen, this, that, the other. You need to make sure that you look for business partners, form joint ventures. If the raw materials are cheaper on the other side, go and establish your plants over there. Manufacturing sites, just go over there, form your JV. At the end of the year, everybody makes profit. Same thing. And, you can build something there. You can ask them to send the parts over to your country, and then of course, let them become one of your partners. Education, job training. I think the government has a big task. You know why? Job training is important. We need to train the grassroots people to know how to handle electronics products, food, garment, automotive parts, for example. Because once, one is a sunset industry, you can go over to another job. And that's really important. The other one I would like to point out is also all the countries in ASEAN, what they should be doing now is should pay attention to the language skills, especially English. This is something that I think we keep talking about it in Thailand. It hasn't happened yet. But let me I just heard the other day that the most vocal prime minister in ASEAN in terms of language skills, and particularly English, is Prime Minister Hun Sen. It's true. He doesn't know how to speak English, but his children went to school in the US. But anyway, He's been telling his people that the key to AEC 2015 is language skills, and English is something that we Cambodians must study. Thailand is at a disadvantage here. You know why? Because Myanmar people, Lao people, Cambodian people, when they come to Thailand, they understand Thai, but we don't understand them, and that's ridiculous. That's embarrassing. But just remember one thing: English is an official medium of communication in ASEAN, and that's been written down. So I think Thailand has to be aware of this particular situation. I'd like to send this message through to the Minister of Education. Anyway, he's not here. Okay, next please. Okay, I think if you look at the advantages here, we have high potential manufacturing and service industry. This is for Thailand now. Okay. The other information that I'd like to just point out would be this infrastructure. I think we've been trying very hard to improve our infrastructure in the country, and this is really supporting the ASEAN connectivity scheme of things. Thailand is right in the center of ASEAN, and I think with our capability, I think we can form Thailand into an ASEAN hub. High-skilled labor in many sectors we have. And of course, inherent agricultural expertise, we have a lot of that. Abundant natural resources. In other countries, when they're talking about ASEAN, like what we're doing now, they might be saying exactly the same thing. So we're on, level playing field. But if you look at the disadvantages on the other side, you would see that the teamwork in our country is not very good. And of course, very poor coordination among the government agencies. Believe me, when you talk about AEC, you go to the Ministry of Commerce, you go to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, they don't talk to each other. They don't talk to each other. This is, I don't understand this thing, okay? But in Indonesia, if you notice Indonesia, they have a coordinating minister who would try to work together among the other ministries like Foreign Affairs, trade, industries. But we don't have that because everybody is talking to themselves. This is a problem in Thailand, by the way. Anyway, SME needs help. I told you about that. And of course, we've got some issues on environments conducive to businesses. Political wrangling, we're still quarreling. Corruption is still a problem. If you don't believe me, you can ask Kundusit, but write to him. He's up there. Education, people development, language skills, I mentioned that already. Next slide, please. This one, I just want to go through briefly. Discrepancy over national and regional law, rule, regulation, we're going to be together. Okay. National interest prevails over collective interest. I've had the opportunity of telling face-to-face to the leaders of ASEAN, and I told them that, if you're looking at national interest as top priority in your agenda, then 2015 AEC will become difficult for you. But if you look at, if you put ASEAN collective interest up on top of the agenda in your own country, then AEC 2015 will become smoother. The other one, the other challenge is really the general unawareness of AEC. People out here know, a couple of blocks away, you go out there and ask people, hey, are you aware of AEC? They'll tell you, what the hell are you talking about? Language barrier, that's another one I already touched on. Let me just go over to my last slide. The impact on business, I think you can figure that out, but how to adapt. I think we need to think ASEAN nationality and act accordingly. If you think you're Thai, you want to beat the Vietnamese, that's not going to work. You have to proactively seek business partners. We have lots of FTAs +1, +3, +6. One day maybe +8, but +8 would include Russia and the US. But once you get the US in, they'll be, dominating everything. But anyway. Number 3, carefully coordinate competition. That's another important thing. Just remember, coordinating competition doesn't mean that, forget it, antitrust, forget it. Don't have to worry about the US. This is an ASEAN community. And then, of course, what you need to do is to study FTA, monitor various developments, common AEC rules and developments. You need to talk to the government agencies, understand what's happening, follow these rules, pay attention to improving your efficiency and productivity, and of course, develop your people, enhance employees' potential. And that's about all you have to do. And if you can do that, I think we'll all be happy AEC 2015. But if you ask me what's going to happen 1st of January 2015, I'll say chaos. Chaos. Anytime we say, God, chulamun all the way around. Because nobody knows what's happening. We're waiting for the government to help. That's all right. We need to be prepared. Tell your friends, tell your relatives, people you know. And that's about all I'd like to say. Let me just give you one last sentence. I'd say we have plenty of opportunities with awaiting threats. I'd say AEC will surely boost the growth and prosperity in ASEAN, including Thailand, of course. But it's incumbent upon us to prepare ourselves to cope with available opportunities or they become threats. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Arin. I think, very, very insightful, and I think, sitting and listening to you, I heard a lot of words, and I think I like the last one the best, from competitiveness, cooperation, competition, and I think the last one is coordinated competition. Okay. So I think maybe it's the right time to hear from an economist. I've asked Dr. Matthew to talk about this, and also maybe if he has some case studies or examples he can provide.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the organizers inviting me. I said to Supachoke that I really hate to follow Arin, which I've done before, because he's a very hard act to follow. I was asked originally to speak on the perspective that foreign investors might have on the AEC. And given that we have 5 minutes, I thought I would make 2 points. The first is that foreign investors should indeed welcome the AEC, but the real opportunity is for Thai investors and for investors within ASEAN. So why foreign investors would welcome a grouping like the AEC is very clear, and I think Dr. Prasad was very eloquent on this. When you have a market of 600 million, then investors will come. They find it an attractive place because the market is huge and growing, and so they will come. And you're already starting to see this, and I think most recently we saw this in the real increase in investment in automobiles at a time when all our econometric regressions would say that the political problems would have prevented investors from coming. In fact, they came in large numbers over the course of the last year. And I suspect that that's partly because of the prospect, the branding, the growing awareness of the ASEAN economic community. The fact that if you invest in Thailand, you can get the benefits of Thailand's infrastructure, Thailand's engineers and other skills, and still export to all 600 million. So yes, foreign investors will benefit. However, having said that, my guess is that the benefits of that are not quite as large as you might think, because the countries within ASEAN already have low tariffs. And so investors have been seeing that and have been coming in for years. And there are some additional gains to be had. I think that's what I was referring to before. But it's not clear how much more you could get just from the creation of common market, because you've already reaped some of the benefits of that. Most of the countries in ASEAN, Myanmar is one notable exception, have already reaped some of these benefits. The real price from foreign investors, I think, will come if if and when the process of ASEAN opening up to India and China continues. Because if investors believe that they can establish themselves within ASEAN countries, and it's not a market of 600 million, but 2.6 billion, then you will really see some changes. But that, I think, is still a ways away. I know that efforts are underway, but that's where foreign investors, you will really see, I think, a bigger change. So foreign investors will benefit, but I think the real benefit will come for Thai investors. And let me put it this way. I'll start with an idea that I think the Deputy Prime Minister was referring to, which is that Thailand has been a hugely successful country. It's grown from a low-income country to a high middle-income country, and at a record pace. There was something called the Commission of Growth that looked into post-war economic developments, and which defined success as sustaining growth rates of 7% or more for a period of 25 years or more, because that's what you really need to transform yourself from a poor country. And there were only 13 countries globally that have managed to do this. Thailand is one of them. And the way they did this were the things that the Deputy Prime Minister was referring to, that Thailand was able to attract investors, especially in manufacturing, who were establishing themselves for export. They were very successful in doing that, and that led the way for Thailand's great success. The Commission of Growth also found that of those 13 countries, only 6 were able to make the transition from middle income to high income. And Thailand, at this point, I think is not on track to become one. And it's in this, and I think this is what the Deputy Prime Minister was referring to, that changes will have to be made to be able to achieve high income. And those are the things that I think we will have to think about. And as I'll come to in a minute, I think the ASEAN Economic Community can help. So what is this? Why will the strategy that has been successful for so long, why is it unlikely to continue to be successful? Well, the very success also brings about the limits to that strategy in the following sense. If that strategy was based on companies in Japan and elsewhere coming to Thailand and other countries in Asia and establishing themselves because of low wages, then as a country grows, by definition, it cannot be a low-wage country anymore. It has to transition out of that. So that old strategy, because of its own success, will not be sustainable. And as you add in the fact that countries like China, Vietnam, India, and Bangladesh are now trying to emulate what Thailand and Malaysia and Singapore and Korea did, then that old strategy will become less tenable. And so you need to have a change in your strategy. What is needed to bring about this change is a broader question that I have in 5 minutes. But I think the ASEAN AEC can help with this in the following way. Some of the elements of this change include, will basically involve Thai companies moving up the productivity chain, so that they are moving to higher productivity, higher value-added chemicals, as opposed to the low value-added manufacturing. And the elements that will allow companies to do that, some of them include the kinds of things that Dr. Prasanth was referring to when he was talking about what the benefits of the AEC are. As the ASEAN Economic Community integrates, Thailand and Thai companies will have access to skilled labor from across the community. And that's a resource that they will be able to benefit from as they try and sort of move into more competitive areas. One of the notable features of sort of the Thai recent experience has been how poorly services have done relative to manufacturing. If you look at Korea's growth trajectory or Taiwan's growth trajectory, they also started out as low-wage manufacturing-led growth stories. But over time, they gradually transitioned into services, where services became a greater and greater share of GDP. Thailand is one of the only countries I know where the share of services has actually been stagnant for a number of years. Now, part of this is because of the very success of manufacturing, but clearly Thailand will have to develop will have to develop services if it wants to continue its growth path. And so this integration, the liberalization of services within the ASEAN economic community, I think will help with that. A third area where the ASEAN economic community will help will be by broadening the markets that Thailand trades with. So the success story in Thailand has not exclusively, but to a large extent been based on being part of a regional supply chain that exports to countries in the West. So even the growing exports to China and Malaysia and other countries partially reflects these supply chains where you're exporting goods that either are assembled, finally assembled in China or Malaysia, or they're exporting here, but eventually the market still remains very much the West. And part of this growth transition will come about when the markets, the final markets become markets within the region. And the kind of trade facilitation that will be important and that is very much a part of the AEC agenda will help move with that. So my first point is, I'll repeat that again, is that the real benefits to the ASEAN economic community, the promise of it, comes for Thai and ASEAN investors, not for foreign investors in the sense of US or European investors. My second point is that I don't think the change will be very dramatic in 2015. And I don't say this as a cynic. As you can tell from my first point, I'm a very big believer in integration, in economic integration. I think there are many benefits to it. But what we know, including from the European experience, is that the kind of integration that is foreseen in the ASEAN economic community actually is very hard and requires a lot of hard and sustained work. So so for example, there's been very good progress in lowering of tariff barriers. But the lowering of other kinds of barriers, which I think Arin was referring to in non-tariff barriers, has gone much more slowly. There's a major agenda in trade facilitation. And what this refers to are things like recognizing for truckers to be able to go from Thailand to Vietnam with one clearance so that they're not continually stopping at the border. For the insurance of these drivers to be recognized across as they travel from one country to another. And there are hundreds, so these are just small examples, and there are hundreds and hundreds of things that need to be changed to really integrate countries. And that requires a lot of work. And that work will not be complete in 2015. I mean, we can see what needs to be done, we can see how much time that remains, and there's still a big agenda. And I used to work, as Supachoke said, I used to work in Europe and Central Asia when the EU accession countries were going through this. And because of the existence of a supranational body like the European Commission, they were able to get the agencies, and this literally requires all the government agencies and the private sector to do the work that is required. And the European Commission was able to drive that work. And that work is going a little bit slowly, not just in Thailand, but in all of the AEC countries, at least from my perspective. And so there will still be an agenda for this promise, this vision to be realized. And that work needs to be accelerated now and needs to continue after 2015. That were my 2 points. That was my 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Nassif. I think very interesting. You said that already the benefits that Thailand can gain from the ASEAN have already been achieved, but there are elements, for example, coming into ASEAN and connecting with the larger economies, whether it be China, India, or I think right now they're negotiating with the EU, which nicely brings us to our next panelist, Dr. Sarasin. Dr. Sarasin is going to tell us about the China angle, right, from AEC.
Because of that, I would like to start by noting some, it's not disagreement, but some reservation with what my friend over here, Arin. Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I just got off the plane and, Shanghai, but I'll try my best to make myself heard. If you can't hear me, please. But he was commenting on the need. He said many things which I agreed. One thing that really tripped me was his insistence that everyone spoke English, good English, to communicate. But I just noticed that we just had a prime minister who spoke excellent English, and I don't know where the country, where that may kind of, but I was in a more, how should I say, more friendly manner. I said that what Mr. Wen Jiabao, the Prime Minister of China, was saying to the rest of the world at the World Economic Forum in Dalian just the other day. It's kind of the annual regional, the annual Asia WEF gathering. He was speaking Chinese, and everyone heard him loud and clear, particularly the Greeks, the Italians, the French, who hardly spoke Chinese. And he said, we're not going to abandon you. We're going to continue helping you. And he said it in such a nice, he himself is a very likable person. He has really have a pleasing personality. He has an excellent memory. You meet him once, and many years later, he will still remember you. He's very good. He's very consummate, if I may say, politician. Very skilled. Anyway, his his traits aside, he said it as a national policy that China is a globalized economy. Now, China is a part of the global economy, a globalizing economy, and China has the obligation to, solve crises, solve problems like ones that are happening to the European. And he could be very conciliatory to Europeans because, unlike the Americans, the Europeans readily concede that they're in deep trouble. Whereas the Americans, on the other hand, they're in deep financial trouble, but they continue to say the American century is not over yet. Well, we have seen the American century saving the world for 50 years, and that's to be commended. But I'm afraid American politicians, I have to be very provocative here because I only have 5 minutes, are still saying, and many people in this area or region still believe, the words of American politicians who make forays into our region and say, you may do this, you may not do this, and so forth and so forth. Chinese politicians, on the other hand, don't do that. And I think that this is a key difference between the approach. I'm not saying we are at the dawn of the Chinese century, not yet. But all predictions, all projections, there is a likelihood of that happening perhaps in another 20, 30 years. We don't know yet. Chinese are not saying those things that they're going to replace the Americans. In fact, they said they are very much part of the world. The choice of words is very, very important. I think even though it may only create some psychological or I guess psychological would probably be the best term to describe what I'm trying to say, and that is in this age of turbulence, where America is losing world leadership, and we could go on and talk about that, the causes and all that, and where the Chinese are really in the driving seat, even in the American economy. Or at least there are 2 seats now, it's not the 1 seat, it's a 2-seat kind of situation where they have a lot of, how should I say about the financial situation in the U.S. in terms of debts that are owed to them, as well as reserves that are 70%.